the very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier podcast, where I will sit down and converse with the superstars, the overachievers, the masters of our craft. Each episode will be a deep dive into their personal philosophies, their habits, the tools they use, and the secrets to not only their success, but overcoming failure as well.
First, find somebody you can mimic, then find somebody you can stand, and then try to focus on one style until you master that style.
So if you say I can't do something, well, you're absolutely right. But if you say you're going to, you're absolutely right with that too.
People say that you shouldn't define yourself by your work. That is not true.
You know what Dave Farley does when he's, lucky enough to be at the World Equestrian Games? I'm watching other people work.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
This podcast is for all of you out there who share my passion for the job and the desire to always improve. These interviews will put you in touch with the inner workings of the role models we all want to emulate. So let's get to it.
There's only so many hours in a day, and it's a matter of what you do with them.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier podcast. I'm sorry it's been a while since the last episode. I've had a lot on my plate over the last month and a bit. A group of my peers and I traveled down to Heartland Horseshoeing School at the beginning of October to do the certification course and the subsequent certification tests that weekend. I have to give a shout out to Allie, Shantae, Kayla, and Simon, who all joined me on that trip. I can't express how proud I am of them for all that they accomplished within that short week, and everybody else that we met. Chris has said it, and you will actually hear Russell speak to this in the interview you're about to hear. There is nothing like going through the certification process for putting that spark back into your life and back into your career. It has been wonderful to see I had it happen to me, but then to watch it occur in other people. It's just an incredible thing to be a part of, and you just meet and develop such great relationships with so many people. There were people there from all over the world, and you're all in the same boat, and you're all striving to become better farriers. This is just my plug for doing the certification process. I really implore you to look into it and start the process. You will not regret it. No matter what the outcome of each test, it just makes you a better farrier and a better person. This leads us back to our podcast guest. I met Russell a couple times down at Heartland Horseshoeing School, once while he was preparing for his ASF fits, and then a second time more recently back in February while he was preparing for his AWCF with the Worshipful Company of Farriers, which he just recently passed. Russell is part of the reason why I started the process to do my ASF, and I hope he inspires some of you with this conversation you're about to hear. I asked him quite a few questions regarding the exams, how he prepped for them, and why he did them in the first place. As you will be able to hear in the conversation, he's a pretty easygoing guy and really easy to talk to. He has a lot of great stories, and I think I've learned that his secret is that he just gets whoever he's hanging out with slightly inebriated, and then they become one of his stories. So I've just always been cautious to not become that person. I hope you all enjoy this as much as I did. I now bring you Russel Floyd. Here is Russell's bio in his own words. Russell was born and grew up on Vancouver Island in the small town of Honeymoon Bay. He had a love for horses and the outdoors since he was old enough to walk. He attended the Olds College Farrier program in Alberta right out of high school, and then he attended an apprenticeship program with a farrier on the island, shoeing the carriage horses in Victoria. Being in his early 20s at this time, he searched for work and got on with an outfitter. This led into the next 10 years of guiding big game hunts, guiding pack trips, and instructing guide schools. Listening to the advice of a business mentor, he started his own farrier practice in a small town called Prince George, which is pretty much in the middle of British Columbia. A place that is just about as wild as it can get. Pursuing certification and competitions, he recently just completed his associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers and is gearing up for this year's WCB finals in Las Vegas. He runs a successful farrier practice alongside his beautiful wife, Anya. I'm sitting here today with Russel J Floyd, and Russell was gracious enough to allow me to try this for the first time, a remote recording of the podcast. So we've already spent a long time trying to figure this all out so that we could record this episode. Thanks again very much, Russell, for doing this with me tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So I thought it'd be interesting to start with the episode you did on Man Tracker and how you came to be on that show. Could you explain your history with horses and the mountains and being a guide?
Sure. Well, I'll start, I guess, with Man Tracker. I was working for a guest ranch at the time, a guest ranch outfitter, hunting outfitter, guest ranch in the summer. We did pack trips and we did hunts and all that kind of stuff. So the lodge that I worked with, Man Tracker and the whole outfit, they wanted to come to that part of BC to do an episode. And they ended up staying at the lodge or at our lodge, and they needed places to rent horses and they needed a local guide. And my name just from the local area came up. And, you know, to be the sidekick to Man Tracker is maybe a little less of a process. They're really looking for someone that's got some horses, knows the trails, and is maybe somewhat comical. So after a short interview with the director, producer, it worked out. So it was really quite easy for me. I was kind of right place, right time. And he liked me on the brief interview we did. And that led to 2 episodes of doing the Man Tracker show.
How did you become a farrier?
Well, I guess back up even more into how it came about. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in a little town. You know, it's just a little redneck town. Everybody thinks Vancouver Island's full of hippies, but it's actually got a lot of history is logging. And so there's a lot of little redneck towns. And I grew up in one of those, just grew up as a kid, liking horses and, you know, liking the outdoors, kind of the camping and the hunting and the fishing and archery and that kind of stuff. And that was just kind of that outdoor world. Always just loved Western movies, and I just liked horses and was always intrigued. And I probably rode a pony when I was 5 years old at Coombs on Vancouver Island, little fairgrounds. Every opportunity I could get, I just liked horses. I just kind of thought it was the cowboy thing to do. How cool would this be to just be around them? And then, you know, as time went on, I kind of got more opportunities to ride through friends and a cousin and field trips and that kind of stuff. And then when I was about 15, I didn't even know what a farrier was, but I was kind of, you know, with some friends, and they had a farrier that was going to come and shoe the horse that day. And I thought, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I'll watch this. I was about 15. This big jacked up Dodge Dually, you know, comes in the driveway, and it's kind of an old 70s Dodge, and it's kind of lifted up, and it's got this big work body on it, and it's got an anvil sticking out of the trailer hitch. And I'm like, this is kind of cool, right? So, you know, this girl jumps out, and she's the farrier. It was a girl farrier, woman farrier. And she's wearing like steel toe pack boots. She's got the Carhartt pants with the patches on. She's got one of those Stanfield sweaters on that are kind of typically worn on island, like in the logging community. And she's like smoking a cigarette. And I'm just like, this is pretty out there. This is pretty wild. And she shot the horse. And I just thought from that day, like, that's what I got to do. Like, that just looked like the ultimate cowboy thing, you know, having this big truck and smoking your own, you know, your own cigarette. And I just thought it was cool. So ever since then, I was kind of intrigued with becoming a farrier. And I didn't know where to go to school at that time or how to pursue it. In a little magazine, I found this guide school put on by an outfitter in northern BC. And this guide school was like a 2-week school of how to pack and how to, you know, work with horses. And it said shoeing. It'll teach you how to shoe in 3 days. And I thought, oh man, I got to go to this. Like, that's how I'm going to be a farrier. I'm going to take this outfitter school. So I showed up for that course and did the 2 weeks. It was cowboy shoeing. We used St. Croix toe and heels and cold slap these shoes on there. And that was it. That was how I got into it. And I ended up working for this outfitter for quite a few years, guiding and kind of going up the ranks as a guide. And that's what kind of led to the man tracker thing. But that was also, it was really my seeking out how to become a farrier. And that's where I really started, kind of right out of high school, working for outfitters.
Cool. For our audience, I'll have to do like a whole flow chart at the end of this just to show the timeline.
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of the girl that you first met that was shoeing that day?
Yes, her name was Renee Davey, and she was a farrier in the Duncan, lower Vancouver Island area. I've never really actually had much of a conversation with her ever since. I've never really crossed paths with her ever since, but just being a kid and seeing her work and just thinking that's the ultimate cowboy thing to do, that really gave me my direction, I think, from that point on.
That's really cool. Who were some of your mentors coming up?
Well, I went to school right away. Like I did that 1 year, that guide school, and I worked a summer season with this outfitter. And then I went on to find Olds College and then actually took their 9-month program. And I had a good class. There was a lot of us in that class that were quite competitive with each other. And I guess right in the beginning in the farrier world, I didn't necessarily have much of a mentor at that time because I went out, I did my practicum, and I shod with a guy named Rick Billings, who was also on the island. He was kind of a fun cowboy type, and we did the draft horses for Victoria. So I spent all my summer kind of learning on these big draft horses with Rick. So he was a bit of a mentor, but I guess at that point in my life, I didn't necessarily have a farrier mentor. I went back to the guiding and spent quite a few years guiding at that time in my life.
Interesting. So after the guiding, what caused you to then get right back into farriery to the extent that you have now?
Just growing up a little bit, I guess. When I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have been able to run a business. I was early 20s, kind of riding around the mountains, hunting, doing pack trips. I was, I always had some clients, after Rick, he actually got out of shoeing shortly after and passed on some clients to me. So I did some trail horses and some backyard horses in between my guiding. So I'd always had my hand in shoeing the whole time. And then this guest ranch outfitter I worked at, he had 65, 70 horses. So I did a large portion of the shoeing for those. So I always had my hand in it. But realistically, at that point in my life, I wouldn't have been mature enough to run a business, let's say. So after about 10 years, another mentor of mine that was a bit more of a business mentor, he said, Russ, maybe you should think about buying a piece of property and, maybe starting your own business and sort of mastering some business skills. So that's probably what led me to buying a property and then landing in Prince George and having a bit more of a successful business. So I was about 30 at that time when I really did the switch from guiding to full-time farriery.
Okay. The subject of the property came up. I'd learned from Cody the last time I was down at Heartland with you and him that you actually live in a log cabin. Would that be on this property you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah, that would be it. It's not actually a log cabin. It's a small cabin. And
okay. You're without power and...
No.
Is that part true or was Cody pulling my leg?
I have power now. At the time, I didn't have power. And that was just a bit more of, going from the switch of guiding. Let's say, guiding isn't going to pay you very much. Let's just say I'm on my 20s. I'm, guiding. I haven't saved up much of anything. And now I'm making the move to become a full-time farrier. And I'm actually doing quite well at this time as a farrier because, the town I lived in, I got busy fairly quick. But being an entrepreneur or being a small business owner, the banks aren't going to lend you money at all. And
no, they won't.
That's, I guess, what happened is I just kept searching and searching and knowing that I needed to find something, own something. And this property came up. It was 5 acres, 20 minutes out of town, 1 block from a really nice lake for the summertime. I met the guy because I actually found it on Kijiji or something like that. The owner was actually willing to finance it. So that's how I got into the property was, the mortgage brokers wouldn't look at me. And this guy did an owner financing. So that was my way into it. And so I bought the property from him. And then slowly over time, instead of renting and paying $1,500 a rent in town, I decided to just build a little cabin. And I built this cabin and didn't have power and water. And then, a year and a bit later, I put a well in. And, 2 or 3 years later, I put power in. And, we built a septic system. So it's a work in progress. But it was more just having to do something, and the bank's not really gonna lend you anything, so you just kind of do what you have to do, right?
Yeah, no, that's incredible. You're kind of an anomaly for a whole generation that's known with just staying with their parents.
Yeah. Well, interest rates kind of scare me too, like I do numbers, and you get a mortgage and you get a big fancy house at age 25, 30. By the time you've paid that off after 25 years, you've paid more than double the purchase price for the house. So
yep.
For me, being in hunting camps, I was used to little cabins, and the outfitters, if you know the outfitting community, they're pretty rough characters. So you got some pretty crude living conditions with outfitters. So for me, building a little cabin was really not much of a task. I mean, I probably built the whole cabin for $7,500. It's a comfy little cabin.
Cool. That's awesome. You might be the only person I know who's ever done that. So I'm glad Cody gave me that little tidbit of information so I could get it out of you. Now, your practice at home, what's that like? Could you explain that?
Yeah, I'm in Prince George. The town is in surrounding areas, probably 100,000. We're right in the middle of British Columbia. My practice is mixed. I've got a big jumper barn. I've got some dressage riders. I do probably a lot of penning horses, barrel horses, trail horses, hunting horses. It's a mix. And to be in the town I'm in, you have to do a bit of a mix, or you just won't have a full clientele. There's just not enough of anyone to specify in anything. So definitely a mixed practice for sure.
Okay. I know in communicating with you to do the interview, you even travel sometimes to do some for outfitters still?
Once in a while. I got a lot of history with outfitters, so maybe shoeing for them is not always the best.
Oh, geez. Now I want to know what all this history is.
I do a little. I've got a couple outfitters. I do, and that's fun. Yeah, so in the summertime, I do a little bit of the outfitting horses, and I don't travel very far. When I first started, I took on whatever I could, and I made what worked. I drove farther. I stayed the night in other places if I had to. I don't do that so much anymore. I've got 2 small groups of horses. I travel. It's about 3.5 hours, and then I stay the night with a couple friends, and I do the horses, and we kind of have a little barbecue or whatever. They're good friends, so I do that. I used to do that more and make it more profitable, but now it's more of a fun thing than it is a profitable thing. Right.
And then you're quite the competitor. How did you get into that?
Well, I think, I like the competition. Cody's been definitely a big influence for me to do better and to kind of reach a higher potential. Cody's been a big influence on that. Maybe even before I met Cody, one of my good friends, Jack Kettle, he was in the same shoeing class that I was, and we actually had a good crowd of us in that shoeing class. And from that class, a bunch of the classmates have been on the Canadian Farriers team and have either won the Canadians. So I was friends with these guys from the beginning, and they stuck with it, while I was riding around the mountains. They were there, competing on the Farrier team. So I always had a bit of a closeness to these classmates of mine. I think, this was time I always wanted to get back into it and also kind of be with them again in the sense of competition or one day the Canadian Farriers team.
Right. So we met a couple times, I think it's twice now, at Heartland. Both times at the blacksmithing course. And I met you once you were preparing for your ASF. And then the next time you were preparing for your AW, which you successfully completed. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So why did you decide to go through this process of achieving those goals? I mean, you also have your CJF. I mean, you've got more letters behind your name than my doctor. So what made you decide to put yourself through that?
I just like doing stuff. I like, the certifications are a great goal. And then, when you have a goal, you end up opening the book as opposed to buying the book and leaving it on the coffee table.
For sure.
I think, just my history, my parents are actually have nothing to do with horses. They're school teachers. So maybe the whole certification process is maybe something I've kind of picked up from my parents, just kind of going through the academic route. Maybe there's a little of that. Also me stepping out. There was a time, I don't feel it anymore. There was maybe a time where a lot of my classmates have achieved a lot of good stuff being on the Canadian Farriers team, and I hadn't. So this was maybe a way for me to catch up in a sense, or improve my skills, kind of become a peer again, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense. I competed a little bit in the beginning, and I just wasn't doing well at that sort of level. And I found that going for the examinations actually helped me for the same reason. Like, I wanted to become a peer. I didn't want to be just a keg shoer to them. For some reason, I thought I had to prove to them that I was worthy of hanging out after the conferences or something.
Yeah. And maybe in the beginning it was a little of that, and I don't think it's that necessarily anymore. But in the beginning, I just, didn't want to be the guy riding around the mountains, putting on St. Croix toe and heels and doing the pack horse dub,
Yep. So obviously you felt Heartland was a good place to hone your skills. Could you explain why?
Well, if you know anything about me, I think I've probably, looking back at my life and maybe looking at the questions you've asked me, I really probably just do a lot of stuff because I think it's cool. I don't really. I got into shoeing because this girl drove this great big jacked up Dodge with an amble sticking out of the back and had Carhartt pants and a roll your own. So when I was in Olds, I had a great instructor. His name was Dean Sinclair. And he always told us these stories about Heartland, about Chris Gregory making you do push-ups and working you dawn till dusk, and kind of just this hardcore experience. And I heard that at like 18. I was like, man, that's cool. I should have gone to that school. I just always had that. And then actually at our fall conference later that year, all our classmates went out to this Western Canadian Farriers Association fall conference. And the clinician was Chris Gregory. And he was at this deal. And, he had the cowboy hat. He had this big handlebar mustache. And he was, forging, he was doing demos in the parking lot at, I'm sure it must have been 9:00 at night or something. And I thought, man, that's cool. I should have gone to Heartland. So people had always asked me, like, in the past so many years, like, if you were to go to shoeing school, what would you do? Or where would you go? And I told people I would go to Heartland in a heartbeat. That's just, that to me sounds like the roughest, toughest place to go in Missouri. I would go there if I was to do it again. So a few people I recommended to go there, they actually went there and they said it was great. They said it was awesome. And now I had to go there and experience it for myself. So really, I just went there to do a pre-cert clinic, and it was a pre-cert clinic for some of the FITS exams. And that was my opportunity to finally go there and see what Heartland was all about. And that's really kind of how I ended up going there. It sounded like the granddaddy of horseshoeing schools, or that's how I viewed it anyways. And that's why I ended up there.
I'm glad you did, because then I got to meet you, and that kind of led us here. The last time we were sitting at Tractors, and you were telling me how you integrated practice into your weekly schedule. Could you explain that for the audience?
Sure. With practice, my view on it is it's just regularity. And I know one of your other questions was, do you get chronic aches and pains and stuff like that? And I guess with my practice, I think just a little bit regularly is more beneficial than all at one day. And I've got maybe a short attention span, like if you're playing pool, I can only play 2 pool games and then my mind's drifting and going on to different things. So if I get up early in the morning and I build a pair of shoes or do a couple practices, I get up, I'm focused, I'm into it. I do maybe an hour of it, hour or so, and then I go about my day. And if I do that 5 days a week or 6 days a week, it feels like I haven't even done it. It's not that committing anymore, as opposed to going in on a Saturday and just forging for 7 hours in a row. And then, by hour 3, I'm not even really worrying about what I'm doing. So I think with an hour of more concentrated focus, I'm a little more focused, and the practice just seems to be more productive, and I don't hurt because of it. I haven't, hurt anything in that sense. And it just seems something that I can constantly do, just like a workout schedule. So I pretty well do it probably 6 days a week for about an hour and a bit in the morning.
And it was kind of cool when you explained that to me, how you said, well, and then at the end of that week, you've put in a 6-hour day of practice that normally you would have had to do all at once. And like you said, it's easy to get distracted or sore or tired. And that really made sense to me. And I've tried to embrace that myself. What usually ends up happening is I end up doing the the binge, but I definitely have taken that into consideration, and it does help for sure.
Yeah, breaking down the components, and it doesn't even have to be that committing sometimes for an hour, like I feel like if it's a shape I'm trying to emulate for a competition, I might, be making concave shoes for some horses later that day. I just try to emulate the shape in my head. And, by the end of a week, you've got a lot more stock shoes to put in your truck too, if that's what you've been working on.
Right, for sure. Another question that I had for you about these exams was on the theoretical portion of it. How did you study and memorize all that stuff? Like, I know the ASF is really tough and the AW is notoriously tough in that aspect. Did you have any tricks or tips for how you did that?
Yep. Actually, it's just the same way. And there was a time when I did the theory, I did the exact same thing as the practicing. And instead of just going to the shop and building shoes or practicing elements, I just woke up early, and that same hour that I would have done that, I just spent an hour of reading a chapter or drawing a diagram or learning. It was that same hour in the morning before I went to work. It was just, in the books. So, an hour a day, my focus is ready and there, then I'd go about my day. But like you say, at the end of a week, that's 5-6 hours of studying. And the farther in advance I did it, you don't really have to memorize as much as you understand it. So it's really just that same hour, just instead of practical, it's the theoretical.
That makes sense. Much like Cody, you have always come across as a very calm person in the heat of a competitive or testing environment. Like even at school, when Chris will run something, you're cool as a cucumber the whole time. Is that just in your nature? Do you ever suffer from nerves, especially in those exams? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Even in high school, I don't know if I ever really had a lot of exam anxiety. Maybe I'm a bit fortunate that way. Definitely I have, but maybe not debilitating. I've read the book that Cody and Chris recommend. Cody recommended that book, The Mental Edge, to me. Mm-hmm. And that book alone, there's a lot of good stuff in that book. And
for sure,
that has definitely brought my level up. I was in a little club called Toastmasters. I don't know if you know what Toastmasters, they sit around and do.
I do.
Yeah. I was in a Toastmasters club.
That's awesome.
One guy explained it that, we all are nervous when certain things, and it kind of becomes like, we're naturally driven to be nervous because we think it's a life or death situation. But when you get into your mind that you're not going to die and you're not going to get hurt, then I don't know, what do you have to lose, really? That was the theory in Toastmasters of trying to get over stage fright, and maybe that applies, maybe not.
No, for sure. I think so.
I like to also say that my experience with the outfitting and guiding, you get a lot of responsibility in certain ways put on you at a young age, in a way, and a lot of kind of wild experiences of whatever, river crossings and horses having wrecks and panicking and clients freaking out. And I did have a lot of panic situations and wild times. So maybe some of that experience just helped me to get through the competitions and the certifications. And I like doing it. It's just, it's a fun thing. I'm always looking forward to doing it. So that could be something that helps me get through it.
Yeah. I've often heard that nervousness and excitement are pretty much the same thing, depending on how you frame it. So if you're excited to do the exam, that makes sense. One of the things I've learned over the years hanging out with you is that you're a master storyteller. It's probably already come across just in the 30 minutes we've been talking so far. Do you have any stories? There's one I have thought about so many times after you told me.
Oh, it's hard with stories. The best stories always come right in the moment when you're telling stories with others and they go back and forth.
Yeah, for sure.
That particular story was this guy that was in the class before us, and he was going to do a little showing off to the newbies. So he comes in and, you know, he's looking around and he tells the newbies to light my forge and throw in that steel. I want a yellow heat because I'm going to do some slugging. So so he's going to show us how to really hit some steel. And, you know, he hit it about 2-3 times, and then the hammer bounced right back and hit him between the eyes. And it was a little bit embarrassing for him, I think.
I guess so.
Funny for all of us.
Yeah. And what are some of these experiences you've had with the outfitters? Could you think of a harrowing tale of a situation that you ran into when you were doing that?
There's a lot. Some horse related, some staff related, some outfitter related. And the outfitters, if you know what an outfitter is, they're, you know, a hunting guide, right? They guide big game hunts in British Columbia. And,
right.
You know, they're just kind of a wild crew. Like, they definitely don't like rules, and they don't seem to like the government, and on, right? They're all cut from the same cheap cloth. So, you know, they're just a wild bunch. We had, you know, horses with old tack and broken down camps, and, you know, you're guiding people that are millionaires into the mountains. A lot of interesting things can happen throughout a year.
A lot of stuff can go wrong too, I guess.
A lot of stuff could go wrong. And, I mean, we drove these old beat up trucks, and this is a story that just made me laugh like crazy. But we had these beat up old trucks, probably from the 80s, and you're trying to guide these guys around that are millionaires. Half the time they're 50 plus maybe, and, you know, they're out of shape, and they, you know, they don't move very fast, but they got the time and they got the money to come hunting. And, you know, they come out with this 22-year-old kid that's going to guide them around the mountains. And, you know, we went out one day, and it was just made me laugh, but we're driving up this old logging road in this beat up old dusty truck, and the cross ditches are on the road. And I'm kind of looking into the forest, trying to look for what we were looking for. I think we were on a bear hunt or something, and I'm looking for bears, and I just drilled this cross ditch. And I got the client's like probably 300 pounds, and he just shot right out of the seat and just drilled his head right on the roof of this truck. His ass came right off the seat, and like probably 8 inches or so. And I was just, I just laughed. I felt bad, but it was so funny to see this guy drill his head on the ceiling of the truck.
So if there is such a thing as tipping in that industry, I guess you might not have received one that trip.
Yeah, that was a funny one. Another funny one was, this is how shoddy we had stuff. So I was on another hunt with this Danish guy that could barely speak any English, and we get in the nice truck from the lodge. This was the one that the outfitter himself actually drove to town, and we're about ready to go out for a morning hunt. And he says to me, he says, "You just got to check the oil levels in this truck, because sometimes it leaks a little and the oil levels go down. But if you smell a little oil, don't worry about it. I know there's a leak there." I said, "Okay, no problem." So we started to go out, and we hit this big puddle, and the puddle just was a lot deeper than we thought, and water is like coming in the cab of the truck. So this was the first instance. We radioed another guide, and he kind of pulled us out, and along we went. So we're climbing up the hill, and you can start to smell the oil, just like the outfitter said. And the guy looks at me, and he's like, "Oh, you know, trying to tell me that he smells the oil too." And I said, "No worries. It has an oil leak. It's going to be no big deal." Well, we go about another 100 yards, and the truck stalls out. And I'm like, "Oh, it doesn't sound good." And a little bit of smoke's coming from under the hood. Well, I get out to just go take a look, and I can see flames from underneath the hood. And I'm like, and they're growing. And I'm like, I'm motioning to the guy to get out of the truck, like, you know, get everything you have out of the truck. So we get everything out, and we hear this bang and this explosion, and it must have been the oil in the brake reservoir. Well, now that the whole truck's on fire now. And it's just, I'm like, "Oh no, this is not good." And the whole truck just goes up in flames, and we had to walk 5 or 6 kilometers before we got back to the lodge.
And so you burnt up the boss's truck.
Yeah, we burnt up his good town truck. And I remember This Danish guy at the end, he says, if you ever come to Denmark to visit me, I will let you hang out with my daughter, but you will never drive my vehicle.
Oh, good to know.
We did some truck hunts, but a lot of what we did was horseback and mountain trips and that kind of thing. So it's definitely lots of pack horse stories and pack horse wrecks and that kind of thing.
Oh, I bet.
This one place I worked, we did about 10 months a year we actually worked, which is pretty good for that industry or for kind of a guide. And some of the funnest we did, like we did the hunts when we could hunt, and we did pack trips when we could. And some of the pack trips would be, I remember one, 11 ladies from England on one trip, and we went into the mountains for 7 days and packed around. And that was, that's kind of what we did. And we'd have anywhere from 5 to 14 people. And then in the off season, some of the funniest ones that we did those guide schools like I took, we did those. And I got into instructing some of those guide schools as well. And those were where a lot of the funny stuff really happened, is because then a lot of the students got to do a lot of things. So that's when a lot of funny mistakes or the pack horse wrecks came in, because you were sort of teaching people how to do stuff, and it may have not been done, or the knot might have been not as tight as you would have liked it to be.
So thank goodness Canada isn't as litigious as the US, I guess.
Yeah.
On a more serious note,
Yep.
You became the president of the Western Canadian Farriers Association. Would that be 2 years ago now?
I just got voted in for the third time. So this is my third year.
Okay, cool. Congratulations. So what has that experience been like, and what did it entail? Like, what kind of time commitment? And
It's good. I didn't seek that out. It was sprung on me a little bit. I had always thought that I would get involved with the association a little bit. I think it's a good thing. So it got sprung on me a little bit, but being me, I wasn't gonna say no. I was going to, take it on like a challenge. And I think that's something I've always been good at, is you're never ready for anything, just like the competitions, just like the certifications. I don't know if I've ever been ready. Eventually it becomes your turn and you have to do something. So that's really kind of what happened. I got nominated kind of last minute, not much of a clue of what would happen or what to do, but I accepted it, and it's been really good. Looking back, it is a bit of time. It's a bit overwhelming at first. We have a membership of about 150 people. So, you help, organize the conference that we have. We have a newsletter. I've talked to a lot of different people that I wouldn't have normally talked to. I've met lots of people that I wouldn't have normally met or seeked out to talk to. So it's been a good thing. I like doing it. It's a good thing. We got a lot of good stuff going on in the association. So
yeah, it sounds like you do.
Yeah, I'm happy to be.
It's a pretty good membership too. Big numbers.
It's time-wise. In the beginning, it was a little bit more because I didn't know everybody, and it was trying to learn the ropes took a little time. And then now that I've done it a bit more, we've got the newsletter rolling out pretty easy. We do conference calls once a month, and that's made a good solid group to make decisions and get things done. It makes our AGMs a little shorter and a little smoother because we've dealt with things along the way. So that was something that I started when I got in. That helped me get up to speed as well. But I think it's kind of streamlined our association a little bit too, doing these conference calls. And I've got a great vice president that's in there, and he kind of started. We were both kind of new at the same time, and Will Klinging is the vice president, and he's very passionate about it as well, and does a great job.
That's awesome. So now what's next on your bucket list? Are you going to attempt your FW?
Yes. Yeah, for one day I will. I'm, don't know the exact timeline, but it's something that I'll definitely work on. I've got a few ideas, and I've got a few mentors that'll help me in that realm. So that's something that I will do. I'd like to improve my competition skill a little bit in the near future. So I've never made the Canadian Farriers team, and that's a big goal of mine, is to get on that. So that's kind of this year's plan to work towards. The FW, you can always, do little bits of it at a time, and I'll work on that as well.
Right. So does that mean I get to see you again in February?
Potentially.
At Heartland? Yeah. This is one of the fairly common questions I ask, but I always find it interesting, the answers I get. Have you ever had an experience shoeing that you originally thought was detrimental or very bad, and then in the end it turned out to be kind of a positive experience?
In the sense of a shoeing prescription, or in the sense of just...
Could be that, or just things going absolutely wrong, or being fired, or...
Oh yeah. I've been fired once.
Just once?
Oh, maybe who knows, a few times, but I've been fired once. I guess with shoeing prescription wise, I've been thinking about this question all day today, and shoeing prescription wise, I don't think I've ever really gotten into much trouble. Like I remember being taught very early on, like the goal is to do no harm. So I've definitely put on some maybe odd packages. We haven't been detrimental to the horse in that sense. Just I was always taught to do no harm.
Right.
I've been lucky. I've stayed out of that. I've probably put on packages that haven't worked. I've probably, I've definitely made mistakes. We all prick a horse, or we've all trimmed a little too much. But I've never thought anything was going to be detrimental and then just worked out in the end. If I thought it was detrimental, we wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Right. I'm going to work on my wording of that question. It's funny that I've made you think of that all day long.
So one I didn't have an answer for. I've definitely been in a situation, this goes back to my outfitting days, of horses that are just kind of unruly. And I grew up in that outfitting world where you see things a little bit, not what we would, expect in a fancy barn. We out in the wilderness, there's definitely some unruly horses, and that's not necessarily the horse's fault. It's more just maybe the poor management of it. But I've definitely seen that side of things, of whether you're, you just try to stay safe. I don't like to necessarily do that kind of stuff now, if that makes sense. The outfitters, they'll put them in chutes or stocks or tie up a leg and do all that. Now in my practice, you can just recommend that they get a trainer or a vet dopes them or something like that before you work on them. We have that luckily now, right?
Yeah, you appreciate it that much more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As you had the preview of the questions, I wonder if you thought of this one quite a bit. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Basically just, I like doing what I'm doing. That's a big part of it. Like if you enjoy what you do, it's not really work anymore. If you find something you love to do, you never have to work a day in your life. So I just love what I do. That's a big part of it. And then the motivation, I've been on the side of the coin where if you don't prepare, you can fail miserably. And I think I've understood that if I don't get out and practice, or if I don't get out and do something, like I've seen the success of it help me. The more I get out and struggle with that, when you get to the competition or you get to the certification, it's never as daunting when you finally get there. So I just know that if I don't get out and do something, then you'll see no progress, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Cody's saying is always the more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle, which is one I've always really, really liked that saying.
Yeah, me too. Now, what advice would you, you've given lots so far, but what advice would you give for somebody who's just starting out?
I think if it was a young person starting out, I would just say you got to get some experience. Just go work with someone, get the horsemanship experience, get under horses, develop your skill. I think in the first couple of years, you just have to develop that skill. One thing I never realized when I was younger was with the farrier trade, you can travel. Farriers are all fun bunches of people. And, you can go to Australia and New Zealand and the UK and Europe and all across the States. They have this cultural program that you can apply and get funding from the American Farriers Association. Like, I think every young person that's a farrier should be applying for that and travel. And just in the first couple of years, just get your skill. Don't worry about whatever, travel, go ride with different farriers and just, get your skill in the early years. That's what I would recommend. And I wish I would have known, that you could have traveled. I would have happily gone to Australia and rode around with 5 different guys to help develop that,
You and I both. Now, how about for somebody who's 5 to 10 years in?
I guess at the 5-year mark, I would say you now should have a skill that you can sell or a skill that you could probably put to work. So maybe at a 5-year mark, I would suggest, you probably got to start thinking about a little bit of business mind. Maybe read a couple business books, The E-Myth or Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are some good books. You got to think about, are you going to be an employee or are you going to run your own business? If you run your own business, there's certain things you should know. So I would imagine in this trade, especially in North America, we work on our own a lot, or that's kind of the typical model is, we are kind of small business entrepreneurs. I would say at the 5-year mark, you've got your saleable skill, should have competent enough to sell, but then maybe you should start thinking about business and about where will you set up, or will you work at a vet college? Will you be an instructor? Will you keep being an apprentice? Will you partner with someone? I think at 5-6 years, you should probably think about that. And then maybe at 10 years, everybody's different, but at 10 years, you have to do something that keeps you, not get stale at the 10-year mark. You're never too late to continue on with certifications or get into competitions. Sometimes if there's a monotony of the work, those competitions or getting out there or going to clinics or continuing certifications are just a great way to keep influencing your business at this point and just keep you enjoying life and enjoying what you do.
Yeah, Chris said the same thing. And I've actually seen that in practice with a couple of people. I have one good friend that he said to me that he was feeling a little stale, and I think he was about 10 years in or almost 10 years in. And I convinced him to go for his CF, and he's in the midst of that process. And just watching him, like that fire that's been lit, I'm a big believer in that now. I saw it work for myself, but it's been kind of cool to watch it in other people too.
It's a good thing to stay excited. At 10 years, if you're still in it at 10 years, you've got a fair amount of time that you've invested already. So it's got to be an important part of your life, or it is going to be. So you got to enjoy it, and you got to get that fire, and you got to take it seriously, because later on, the next step is like, well, how do I retire with this? And, what do I do in that stages of my career? So, you're heavily invested in at that point. So I think you should find ways to definitely keep it going and keep it on the up and up, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was the end of the list of questions I had for you. I guess we could go into what we originally, when you and I were discussing this in the beginning, the rapid fire questions, but I ended up calling it Stratum Tectorium. This portion of the podcast is called the Stratum Tectorium. These are the short answer, surface stuff questions, but it's okay if the guest wants to go deeper. Enjoy. What's your favorite book? Are you a reader?
Yeah, I'm a reader. I read, not really a storybook guy, but, I like reading a lot of, whether it's shoeing, whether it's business, whether it's that kind of stuff. I like reading that. So I've got kind of favorite ones for different parts of my life, I guess.
Well, I'd love to hear.
Okay. Well, my everyday book that I would, give to any new farrier, or the one I keep in the truck, is the Chris Gregory textbook for shoeing. It's a good book. It's got everything you need to know. It's good. I like that book for that. For my AW testing, the Simon Curtis books. I'm kind of a simple guy. I don't want to complicate it with 100 books, but if you focus a lot on those Simon Curtis books, you're going to get a large portion of the information you need for your AW out of those books.
Okay.
Business books. The E-Myth is a great book that is sort of really lays out the business and the entrepreneurship. A must read for somebody that's starting a business. Cody's book, the one he recommended, the Mental Edge for competition. That's a must read book. For investing, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and his books. I've really enjoyed reading his books as well. So,
yeah, that's actually one I was recommended a long time ago, and same thing. Got a lot out of it. So, what's your favorite brand of work boots?
Blundstones.
Really? Steel toe or no?
Steel toe Blundstones. I think I've had them for the last 10 years. They're the best. I probably get maybe 2 seasons out of a pair, which is fine by me. They breathe.
That's pretty
They
good.
got the gel cushion. They're lightweight. They're not bulky. I just keep buying the Blundstones.
Go with what works. What's your favorite make of rasp?
I have been using those green tangs lately, and those I like. I can level a foot pretty good with those. I'm happy with those green tang rasps.
That seems to be the most common answer.
Yep.
What is your dream farrier rig?
I'd like to get a full body bay horse or a full body Stonewell, either or. I've got the capper right now. I'd go with the full body for sure.
Yeah, it's nice having everything right at deck level.
Like I've heard other people say, oh yeah, it's too much and it's too fancy. Where I live here, there's like welders in the oil patch and they need $100,000 before they even turn a wrench or weld anything. Like for a fraction of that, you can get a full body Stonewell and look like a professional. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting the Stonewell. I got one friend that says those Stonewells are just like a handgun. It makes everybody equal.
That's awesome. What's your favorite rounding hammer?
Right now, I've been going back and forth. I've got a beanie hammer now. I like it. I've had a Derek Gardner hammer. I like it. They're really good. I'm happy with those. Matt Marty, I've got one of his hammers. I think he does a great job making the hammers.
I've admired those on Facebook many a time. They keep coming up in my feed. What's your favorite type of bar stock to work with?
Well, I don't use much of it, but I really like that 1/2 by 3/4. That's a nice section to work on. It's probably a little bulky for most of the horses I shoe. 1/2 by 3/4. It's just a nice, easy section, and it makes a nice fullered shoe. And you can put that on pack horses kind of all day long. I don't have a lot that I can use it on, but 1/2 by 3/4 is a good section.
Oh, okay. And then we didn't get into this in the main portion of the interview, and I should have. You do a lot of handmaids in your day-to-day, do you not?
I do. I don't do all, but my guess, I'd probably do about 75%.
Yeah, that's a considerable amount. Yeah. And is it mostly concave or?
That's probably mostly concave. There's going to be a small portion that are, fullered shoes. Maybe some of the penning horses, I put plain stamps on the hinds, but a large portion of it's concave. People always ask, like, why do you do that? And, simple answer, a ton of concave. I've bought some this last year. A ton of concave, 3/8, 3/4 is going to be $4,200 Canadian. And you're going to shoe somewhere between close to 640-ish horses with that ton of concave. Now, if you buy keg shoes, whether it's a Con, whether it's a Workman, whether it's a St. Croix, it's all going to vary a little bit. That same number of horses is almost $12,000. So for $8,000 savings, if I can turn a concave shoe in 2 heats and third with a clip, if I can get a large portion shod with that, that's cutting into my bottom line fairly significantly, I would think.
Yeah, no kidding. And do you usually do them at the horse, or do you just build a stockpile?
Just build a stockpile. Yeah, like my business is kind of boom or bust. In the summer, it's real busy. In the winter, it's slow. I personally think that I don't like building shoes on the job at the horse. I think that's, clients. I've got a lot of clients that are meeting me on their lunch break. They got to go to work. They've got busy stuff. I'm not going to make them wait anymore. I just stockpile stuff and build them when I'm slow and just run kind of a stockpile.
Okay. I should have covered that earlier and I got distracted, I guess. Do you prefer a gas or diesel truck?
Diesel. Yeah. I've got the diesel F350, 6.9 liter Ford. I don't know if I'm totally a Ford guy or not. I like the truck. We're in northern BC here. You got to have a truck.
I thought for sure you were going to say it was a 70s jacked up Dodge diesel.
I would like that truck, but I put a lot of miles on it and I need it to start every day. So my experience with old trucks is I'm fixing them more than I'm driving them.
Yeah. And what's your favorite pastime after work?
Oh, I like a lot of stuff. I like skiing. I like hunting. I like hanging out and visiting people. I used to do a little rock climbing. I'm pretty easy. I got a lot of interests and I like doing new stuff. So that's
whatever you think is cool.
Whatever I think is cool. We're Farriers, right? If something's shiny, I got to go take a look.
I think I'm going to embrace that philosophy now. So what's your favorite brand of keg shoe?
I like the Workmans. The keg shoes I do buy. I buy a lot. I buy a handful of Workmans.
Leather or synthetic pads?
I would say leather.
Favorite type of horse to work on?
A good one. A good, calm.
That's what everybody says. I should just stop asking that question. What's your ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day?
Depends if I'm by myself or if I got a helper. If I'm by myself, 5 is a great number. If I got a helper, if you want to pay them and run a successful business, you might want to do 9-ish sets in a day. Where I am, it's tough to say sets because I live in an area where I do a large number of trims throughout the year. So every day I could go out one day and we would do 22 trims, a pair of fronts, and then the next day could be 8 sets. So it changes, and it's not very consistent for straight numbers with me. It's always a mixed day. If I can work a reasonable amount of time, 9 to 5-ish, and I can fill that up, that's ideal. I don't want to do more than that. So kind of whatever we can do in a reasonable day. Used to work a lot longer. I don't like to anymore.
Can't figure that out.
Fill a work day, 9 to 5-ish. I think that's, you can make a good living doing that.
Yeah. And what's sort of your average time for a set? Like if you were to do new shoes all around?
All depends, but it's an hour to an hour and a half. I don't think we don't think we're any faster than that. When I do have a helper, we double up. By myself, it's an hour and a half. But with a helper, we'll do 2 in about an hour and a half, just because we kind of leapfrog back and forth. So
keep it going. What's your favorite anvil?
I've got a high country anvil that I've had for 15, 16 years in my truck, and it's a good solid work anvil. It's 105 pounds. It's a great anvil. My shop anvil is one of the WCB ones. It's the Anvil brand 220 pounder, 200 pounder, and it's an awesome anvil too. It's the one that the WCB has at their competitions.
Okay. Favorite inspirational quote, if you have one?
Oh, I probably got lots. I just can't think of one. Let's see. Inspirational quote. I had a really good one the other day. Can't think of it right now. I'll have to go back to the more you sweat and practice, the less you bleed in battle.
Yeah, it is a good one. What brand of accounting software do you use?
I pay somebody.
Yep.
So
same here.
I just pay them. So that's they take care of it. I think they just do it on a spreadsheet because that's what they do. But they always say that we should sign up for QuickBooks, but I just pay them.
I finally did take their advice and do that. It has worked for me. What's an app that has most improved your work life?
Probably Invoice to Go. That's how I invoice all my clients. That's quick and easy, professional. It's helped with pricing. Invoice to Go has been great. I think QuickBooks now actually has an invoicing part to it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
It's probably very similar. Invoice to Go, I don't think really has a great accounting part to it, but the invoicing has been pretty good, pretty streamlined. You can remember prices. You can have different prices. You can apply discounts or apply premiums, whatever you want. There's always notifications, and you can increase your price every year if you want, or have client communication. It's fixed a lot of stuff. It's helped me out quite a bit.
Okay, cool. Preferred social media platform?
Oh, I don't prefer any of it.
Okay, I wondered that.
If it includes like a beer at a pub with a few good guys, that would be my best social platform.
Right. Do you have injury insurance?
I do, yeah. I've got a small disability plan. Another topic that I like to talk about is investing and money, and I do like that topic. So I have certain plans or that kind of stuff. I always like to say, I have disability, but I always like the philosophy, like instead of insurance, we should all do assurance. And maybe assurance is, take care of your body and exercise and, just do a reasonable amount of workload, never overextend yourself financially, try to, plan for the future. Like that's all assurance, things that are going to help me if I did have a problem, as opposed to just paying insurance in case I have a problem,
Yeah.
Do things that would hopefully you would not have a problem.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So do you have a regular workout routine then?
I don't work out necessarily, with my forging. I try to do a little bit regularly so that I never get big aches or pains, because it's just you stay in shape for it if you just do it regularly. But I've always been a big on eating well, and, I probably should one day do a little bit of workout, and I'd like to one day, but I'm big on just eating well, no junk food. I try to avoid fast food. If I just kind of eat whole foods, I think that's a good, healthy way. And that's definitely what I work on now for sure.
No, it makes sense. What do you use as your planner or agenda?
Well, I used to use a book, like a day timer. And I've always, for the past 2 years, thought I would eventually go to an app, a scheduling app. Well, at our conference in Chilliwack, my truck got broken into, and one of the things they stole was my day timer. So,
Oh, no.
maybe he thinks he's going to show up and steal some clients. I don't know.
It was obviously another Farrier.
So when the day timer got stolen out of my truck, just a bunch with other goofy little things, like they took earmuffs or a knife and a coffee can full of change and the day timer and the Sirius satellite radio in the truck. And since then, I've just been using the app on the iPhone, and it's been fine. I probably should have switched earlier. It's pretty easy. It's quick. You can see everything. You can change the views. You can even set up email reminders to your clients. So I just use the iPhone app, and it's actually you can link it with Google Calendar. And if I lose my phone, you just log in from any computer and you've got your schedule.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been kind of trying to do the same thing, and I've just never been able to give up on the old paper and pen.
Yeah.
But that experience right there kind of explains why it probably would be a good thing to do.
Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe the stealing my book was just a kick in the butt.
That was what I meant by something you thought was detrimental or terrible that turned into a good situation.
And here's a quote: "A good kick in the butt is sometimes a step forward."
That is a good quote. So what's your favorite method of soothing aches and pains?
Hot tub.
Yeah, mine too.
Hot tub and steam room. I like those steam rooms.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to try that too. Favorite brand of jeans or work jeans?
I like Carhartts. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Carhartts.
Okay. Your favorite drink?
Craft beer or a whiskey on the rocks.
Okay. Favorite genre of music?
Probably country. Big
Okay.
Chris Ledoux fan. Chris Ledoux, Core Blund.
That doesn't surprise me. Do you meditate?
Not really. Driving in the truck, I guess you think a lot, but I don't officially meditate with the legs crossed and the fingers circled. But
I don't picture you doing that either. No.
when we do what we love, I think that's kind of a form of meditating in a way. Or when you're forging in the morning, you can be thinking. You used to think a lot when you ride. So that's driving in the truck. A lot of that kind of thinking, if you want to classify that as meditating.
Right. When you're in the flow of work, that kind of thing. Yeah. What would you have been if not a farrier?
I don't know. Maybe I would have stayed with the outfitting career. Probably, maybe in those lines. I think outfitting or guest ranching or something like that.
Cool. You might be the most cowboy person I've ever actually met, or the most authentic cowboy is how I should have worded that.
We're a little not totally cowboy because we're more outfitter guides, more of the wily bunch that ride around the mountains and that kind of stuff.
I probably insulted you there.
No.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Well, that's the end of the questions. Was there anything else you wanted to cover while we're here?
If I had more stories, I would tell you more stories.
I hope you do come to Heartland in February. That's when a lot of them come out.
Are you going back down there again this year?
Yeah, that's the plan. A group of us went down and did the certification. So I attempted some components of my FITS, the ASF one. I need to do the shoe board and the oral.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to work on that.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm going to England in January because on the 16th of January, it's actually my wife's birthday, is actually the awards ceremony for the AW. So that's a trip. That I'm going to be doing in January this year. I don't know if I can swing both this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, congratulations again. Watching you go through all of that, I mean, that just keeps pushing me to keep going too. So It's inspiring that you did that.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun along the way. Like it's led me to meet people, like yourself, go to different people's shops, and it's a good experience. And it's just like I said before, if it's not really about whether you pass or fail. It's just if you make that as your goal, it's that book that you have. For me, it tends to give you a reason to pick it up a little more so than if you didn't set that end goal for yourself. The book would just sit on the coffee table if not.
I know I picked up that book. I've owned it for years, and I would pick it up and read it, but I wouldn't retain it because I didn't have something that I was going to need to spill it out onto a page at some point, right? The testing really, it's changed my conversations with vets and Maybe sometimes I share too much with clients, but bore them to tears.
One of my helpers and one of my apprentices that I had a few years ago, she doesn't work with me anymore. She got out of Farrier. Maybe I annoyed her. Maybe I sent her on her way. I don't know. But she did work with me for quite a while. And that's when I was doing a lot of my theory portion for the AW, because I broke it up. I did the theory and then I just gone and done the practical. I would read something in the morning and then I would basically, it's a way for me to memorize it. I would tell her all about it in the truck that day.
I actually have, when I'm working, because two of my helpers are going through for their CF, I have them quiz me while we're driving. We tried it while I was working, and it's true, men can't multitask, so it made the day go way too long. So we do it in the truck. That's not as important. Well, keep on doing all the good things you're doing. I really appreciate that you did this with me tonight.
I appreciate you inviting me on. It's an honor to be on here and have you ask me to be that. And hopefully, I maybe someone listening to this maybe is inspired, maybe not. I don't know. I do feel quite honored having you asked me to come on.
People like you that keep striving for things like that. It's amazing how much feedback I get from people after an episode airs. And certain people will just sort of ring true for others. Have a good night, and thanks again.